So welcome everyone to Psalms for Life. And today we're doing Perek Zion, chapter 7. And we want to thank Esther Elagorovich for sponsoring the Psalms for Life series. And may it be a source of merit and bracha and hatzlacha for good health, long life, simcha, naches, closeness to Hashem, closeness to the true tzaddikim. And we want to thank her. Okay, so today we're doing a fascinating psalm that I actually taught many years ago, but didn't have the sources available to me that I have today. So it's really quite an interesting psalm. And what I want to begin with is saying that it's a psalm for the Segulot for the psalm is threefold. It's a psalm for a favorable judgment. It's a psalm for protection against enemies. And it's a psalm for a court case, to win a court case, which many of the psalms are segulot, are segulas for these things. What's interesting is the convergence of all three of these ideas. And as we familiarize ourselves with the psalm, we will not get to every verse today. We'll do some verses. As we familiarize ourselves, we will begin to understand why this is a segula for these things. I do want to briefly mention that when we have anything going on down here in life, anything, chas v'shalom, an illness, a difficulty, or in this case, enemies, or in this case, a court case, we must know that there is a spiritual root to this. It's correlative, not necessarily like the spiritual causes this, but there is a strong correlation. It works both ways. So when we have a court case, specifically, Sfarim say, that is related to a court case up above. And casually, anecdotally, I have noticed that many people have told me, they've come to me, what do? I have a court case. Very often this seems to be taking place in or around Elul. So you can put two and two together and notice what's going on and be more aware. And seeing what messages Hashem is giving to us personally. Okay, so in this psalm, it's actually dedicated to Shaul HaMelech, the first king of Israel, the first king of the Jewish people. And it's, David HaMelech considered him really to be his most complicated enemy. And we know from this class, and any of you who've studied Shmuel and Tanakh, we know that David had a lot of enemies. It didn't make him somebody who deserved enemies. Okay, this was part of the difficult path he had. And one of the reasons Shaul was such a complex and complicated situation for David is because he was the first king, and he therefore was appointed and anointed by Hashem. Okay, he was a Mashiach, he was an anointed one, and David loved and respected him because of this. Okay, he also loved and respected him because he was his father-in-law, and he also loved and respected him because he was a righteous man. He was a tzaddik in many, many ways. Shaul really was. And he's somebody that we don't learn a lot about in general, and we should, because Shaul himself was quite has a lot of lessons in his life for us. So anyway, Shaul at some point, which we've discussed in the past few weeks when we were discussing the history of David, Shaul pursued David relentlessly. He pursued him because he was a threat to his kingship. He knew David was going to become king and replace him. He pursued him to hang on to power and other reasons. Now, David didn't exactly strike back at Shaul in the way that one would when somebody is pursuing one. A rodef is a pursuer, somebody who's pursuing you. And it's somebody who loses, somebody's pursuing an innocent person to murder them, God forbid, which is what the situation was, loses their status as a human being in a way. They've changed their status. This is a halacha. So if somebody is chasing after an innocent person to kill them or seriously harm them, the law is that you can slay them to stop them if need be. But David didn't take up that law in this situation, okay? And he believed that if he defied Shaul, he would be defying Hashem. Yet he still fled for his life, of course. Now, there were two times, very briefly, that Shaul fell into David's hands. Once, he entered a cave, not knowing that David was in there. And David could have easily killed Shaul because it was dark in the back of the cave, but instead he just cut off the corner of his royal vestment, his royal robe, to let Shaul know that David spared his life. David wanted mercy from him. And another time, David encountered Shaul when he was sleeping, but he didn't kill him. He just took his spear. And this is someone, again, who was trying to murder David. David had love. He had love for Hashem, first and foremost. And he believed that Shaul represented Hashem. Now, Shaul promised when he learned of all these things, when he saw that his robe was cut and his spear was taken, and he saw that David didn't kill him, he promised he would never hurt David. He wouldn't even chase after him because he recognized that David was being merciful. However, unfortunately, Shaul didn't keep his word. Okay. And I don't know why the screen went blank. He didn't keep his word. And he was punished by Hashem. Somebody at that high a level, if we don't keep our word, there are consequences. But somebody at Shaul's level, who was a tzaddik and a king and anointed by Hashem, was really struck down, and he became very mentally ill. He went mad, and he had a severe, bitter depression. And it was fueled by his jealousy. And it says in Shmuel that an evil spirit descended on him, and he walked around raving, like crazy, ranting and raving in his palace. Okay. And even though he knew he had sinned, he couldn't stop the jealousy. Now we know that the sages say that if somebody sins, it's because a spirit of folly, of foolishness, of shtus has entered him. Okay. In this case, Shaul knew this and still couldn't get rid of it. Okay. Imagine somebody at that level. Imagine what we have to contend with. Okay. So anyway, Shaul died and David mourned him.
Excuse me, can you hear? There's a friend, my friend is in the waiting room.
Okay, thank you for telling me, but
don't interrupt.
I'm not, that's okay. I'm not seeing anyone in the waiting room. Please tell your friend to sign in again.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, the Chazal tell us that this psalm is the Shir Shel Yom for Purim. Why Purim? Because Mordechai was a descendant of Shaul, And also this psalm talks about, as we will get to the verses, it talks about that the corrupt enemy will fall into his own trap. He'll dig a pit, he'll fall into his own trap. And this is referring to Haman. Okay, so we are going to now begin. And I don't know the person who contacted me, but LJ, I just want to tell you your friend's not in the waiting room. I just checked again. Okay, she might have the wrong link.
I told her to sign in again, and I'll try sending her.
Okay. All right. So anyway, we're going to begin with the first verse. Let's get my. And what we have to know about this psalm is just the first few words offer us a lot of information. So we're not going to get through all 18 verses. Okay. Shigayon LaDavid, Asher Shar, LaHashem al Divrei Kush Ben Yamini. This is a Shigayon by David, which he sang to Hashem about Cush Ben Yamini, Cush the Benjamite. Okay, so generally speaking, there are a few interpretations of who Cush was, but generally he was considered to be Shaul. Okay, from the tribe of Binyamin. Okay, there are other interpretations. So what is this important word, Shigayon? Okay, so a Shigayon can be a variety of things. There's so many comments on this one word that I'm really, really struggling just to pick the cream of the crop for you. So a Shigayon can be a musical instrument that was commonly used by the Levium and played in the Beis Hamikdash. So it could be a musical instrument. It could be the general name for a musical accompaniment. Okay. Also, it is a reference to an error, a shogeg, a mistake. Specifically, in this case, a choice that one makes that's a mistake. Now, the Talmud tells us that David, because of David, many people died. There was a lot of wars around David, which is why he couldn't build the Beis Hamikdash, but his son Shlomo was allowed to, because there was blood on his hands, so to speak. So because so many people died, David wasn't free from guilt himself, and he wasn't free from judgment himself. He was a tzaddik. You know, we learn about David, and then last week we talked about Bathsheba, and this week we're talking about the wars and the battles. And I find this very hopeful, that a tzaddik has flaws. He can make a shogeg, a shaga, a mistaken choice in certain instances. And this gives us an insight into this psalm and the complexities within this psalm. Okay, so let's see what Rebbe Nachman says about this. So the Shigayon is related to the shogeg or the shaga, and Rashi says that he has commentary on the plural of this word, which is shigyonos, and he says that the meaning really comes from the Targum, this mistaken choice, this accidental choice, this, whether it's intentional or unintentional. Here it's unintentional, and it's related to the Targum, the Aramaic translation. Rebbe Nachman takes both Rashis. Okay, he takes the Rashi that says that the word is related to the Targum, the Aramaic language, okay, which we know from Talmud. And it's also related to, the melody itself is related to the idea of mistake, okay? And Rebbe Nachman looks at these two commentaries to let us know that there's a link between Rebbe Nachman has these bechinas, okay, these bechinot, these concepts that we look at together that are related, okay, and aspects of concepts. This is what he does a lot in his teachings. It's fascinating. But here he's saying these two ideas show us something about the relationship between error, mistakes, missteps, bad choices, and the language of Targum, the Aramaic language. Okay. Now, there's a spiritual, deep, mystical meaning to this. Targum, Aramaic, is related to the spiritual world or spiritual energy of Klipah Noga, which is a mix between holiness and unholiness. Klipah Noga translates to the bright shell or the bright radiant husk, okay, glowing husk. Klipah is the husk, the shell, and Noga is brilliant, bright, and glowing. And therefore, there's a relationship between this psalm and the word Shigayon, and a mistaken choice that everybody could make, and it could be stuck in this realm. This realm's neither here nor there. It's not unholiness, but it's not holiness, okay? So Rebbe Nachman explains that a mitzvah is holy, and a willful sin, something we say, you know what? We shouldn't even say it, actually. I'm going to say we shouldn't even say that, or something that we do knowing it's wrong and making that choice. And yet a shagaga or shogeg is an error that's inadvertent. And an inadvertent error is something that lies between the two worlds, the world of holiness and the world of evil, impurity, unholiness. And therefore, this inadvertent mistake actually is like this mixture of the Aramaic. And what Rebbe Nachman tells us is to see how important it is to reckon with our inadvertent mistakes. Because if this psalm is a clue, not to just willful errors, but to shagaga, this idea of a mistake that's not chosen directly, something we stumble into, we have to pay attention. The classic example is on Shabbat. And Rebbe Nachman speaks about this, and so do many other tzaddikim. The idea is we can make a mistake on Shabbat. We can make an inadvertent error. We can turn on a light. We can, by accident, we can bump into it. We can do something not realizing it. Or another type of inadvertent error is we don't study the laws of Shabbat. Therefore, we don't know what they are. And so therefore, we can make errors. And these errors do fall into, they're not in the realm of holiness. They're not in the realm of unholiness. They fall in the middle somewhere. Okay, it's not a great place, though. The Rebbe isn't saying it's a great place. He's just explaining how it's categorized. And of course, we can extrapolate from this to interpersonal relationships. So what is the Rebbe's idea about all these inadvertent errors that we make? Okay, whether it's Shabbat or something else. The idea is the Rebbe says we must learn the path. We must learn halacha. We must learn the path on which to walk. Halacha is the path on which we walk, commonly translated as Jewish law. Okay. And when we learn it, okay, and we get to one level and another level, we begin to prevent ourselves from falling into this realm of neither here nor there. Klipah Noga. It's bright, but it's a husk. It's confusion. Okay. And that definitely affects us mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Now, for those of you who study the law and try to apply it. We can always do better. Everyone can always do better. For those of you who this is a new concept to you, that even an inadvertent error is still something that you don't want clinging to you. It's something to think about and to begin to make a first step, because Hashem knows where we're all at. He knows you inside out, and he knows he doesn't judge you on where you're at. He doesn't judge me on where I'm not at. He doesn't judge me on the level of a tzaddik, and he doesn't judge you on the level of a tzaddik, unless some of you might happen to be one of you, two of you might be a tzaddikus in this class, maybe even more. But he only looks at us at our own level, okay, from what we are capable of understanding. So we get back to the idea of why this is a segula for court case judgment. Protection from enemies, we know from the story of Shaul. What's our worst enemy? What's our worst enemy? So we know Rebbe Nachman says, find yourself in the Psalms. Our worst enemy is the Yetzer Hara. In this psalm, the pursuers of David, okay, of David HaMelech, of King David, it's the Yetzer Hara. Okay, for us, we look at this and we see that the only place to turn to from this is to Hashem and to the tzaddikim, who are going to tell us how to get out of these inadvertent errors. And we could probably we really could spend a few hours on the psalm looking at how David's his errors, his poor choices and his inadvertent missteps could have led to these things. But we want to really get it from spiritual level. So when we say this psalm, it resonates with us from a deeply internal place. And we can use this psalm as a form of introspection of all the psalms. Okay, line 2 is Hashem Elokai b'chachasisi hoshi'eni mikol rodfai v'hatzileni. So Hashem, my God, I have sought refuge in you. Save me from those who pursue me, and please deliver me. Okay. So there's no please in there. I put the please in there. So the pursuers, again, are internal enemies. Now, we may have external enemies. It's true. We may have a court case, and if you're in a court case, there's opposition. But in general, we're addressing this from Rebbe Nachman's perspective that our enemies are internal. That's one of our big problems in life, our Yetzer Hara, the inner battle we have. And the outer battle is a reflection of it. Okay, it's a reflection of it. So David's saying right here, look, I've taken refuge in you. I've already taken, just like last week. He says it's already done. I've taken refuge in you. I've relied on you. I know you've heard me. I know you hear me. Now, save me from my pursuers. Okay, so this is an acknowledgement that we're connected to Hashem, and we're only trusting in him. We're only relying on him to save us, not our minds, not our brilliance, not luck, not the kindness of others. No, only Hashem. Only Hashem, because that's the source of all Yeshuos, the source of all salvations. Okay, we're going to, we only have a few more minutes. Hold on. Okay, we're going to go to, I did a smart thing this week and actually printed out the Tehillim, and now I'm going to have to make sure that it doesn't end up, that I save it for this class. It doesn't end up in a place where it shouldn't be. Okay. So now we're going to go to verse 4. Yes. Okay. Hashem Elokai imasisi zos im yesh avel b'chapai. So, Lord, my God, if I've done bad things, if there's injustice in my hands, okay, if I've acted unjustly, and verse 5, hey is im gamalti, show me, rav achalza sorari rekam. If I repaid the one who did evil to me, and I negated him into emptiness and nothingness, I destroyed him. Okay, then we say, may the enemy pursue me. That's later on. The idea is that David's saying, listen, Hashem, somebody's doing evil to me. They're a rodef, they're chasing me. Remember what I said at the beginning? They're chasing me, but I did no injustice at all. I didn't have injustice in my hands. We can understand that means I don't take justice into my own hands. He didn't do injustice. Although, would it have been injustice to kill someone that's pursuing your life? Not according to halacha. But David is telling us that his hands didn't do anything unjust. He didn't take justice for himself. He left it in Hashem's hands. Hashem was his refuge, as we just learned. So what we know from this is that we say it every night, Shema al Hamita, the bedtime Shema. We ask Hashem that no one be punished on our account. Not only do we not want to take justice into our own hands and get revenge, of course, that's forbidden absolutely in Judaism. 100%, it's not allowed. Revenge is not allowed. And I'm not talking about, by the way, you have a terrorist and then you get rid of the terrorists. That's different. I'm talking about revenge against our brothers and sisters. We don't do that, okay? But at night, when we say this Shema, we actually even ask Hashem to not take justice, to judge someone who harmed us. We don't even want them to be punished on our account by Hashem, let alone us. This is a very big concept. People go over those words every night. If you say it every night, they know that we can't have a grudge in our heart. We can't wish revenge on anyone. We don't even wish that Hashem will punish anyone. It's a really difficult concept, okay? But the idea is that this is actually the kind of potential each of us has. We each have, I'm sorry, there's a text. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a note from someone in class that they were having a problem hearing me or seeing me or anything. So the idea is that we shouldn't want revenge. We shouldn't want to see someone suffer or get theirs. I heard someone say somebody was doing something that wasn't very nice, and the person says, she needs to be taught a lesson. I'm going to teach her a lesson. I remember the feeling of, wait, last night, I know you said Shema al Hamita. We don't do that. This, by the way, if you struggle with it, welcome to the club. Everybody struggles with this. That's why it's imperative and important to say the Shema al Hamita, the bedtime Shema, every night, until this sinks in, until there's no possible schadenfreude for you. That's where you rejoice in someone's downfall. So an enemy of yours. Now, again, I'm not talking about an enemy of the Jewish people or something like this. I'm specifically talking about our brothers and sisters. Okay, David was devoid of this. Other Psalms, it sounds like he wanted vengeance. We'll talk about and explain what that means. But this is an important message to us. And by the way, it's something that Rebbe Nachman says. Rebbe Nachman says directly and specifically, if someone harms you, insults you, and we'll talk about humiliation in a minute, the right path is to go out of your way to be nice to them and kind to them. Not only to just ignore them, not only to not wish that they suffer, but to even do the opposite of what they did. This is a training, it's like a boot camp for the neshama in potential. Okay, very difficult stuff, but we know we're capable of it because this is Judaism. Okay, let's see. We're going to do one more. We'll do two more really quickly. What time is it? Okay. Bor kara v'yach parehu v'yipol b'shachas yifal. That's I'm sorry, that's verse 16. So he dug a pit. So he talks about the pursuit and the liars and the people after him, and he is speaking about Shaul here and perhaps other enemies, and of course our internal enemies. He dug a pit. He dug a bore, and he made it very deep. And then what happened? He fell into the pit he made. That's what happened. Fell right into it. We know that Shaul fell into his own pit. It's kind of sad. So a person who digs a hole, says Rebbe Nachman in the Aleph Bet book, okay, Sefer Hamidos, a person who digs a hole will eventually suffer shame. And sometimes it causes him to become the topic of everyone's conversations. Rebbe Nachman wrote that book when he was a boy. It's a collection of aphorisms that are sourced in everything from the Kabbalah to the Talmud to Tanakh. It's a highly recommend this book. It's called the Aleph Bet book. It's published a beautiful new version of it by the Breslov Research Institute. One page is Hebrew, one page is English, and there's even some of the sources in there. And basically, the Rebbe was referring to this psalm as well. And the idea is that, and it's under the category of humiliating someone else, a category of embarrassment. Okay, it says if you set up a situation for someone to be embarrassed or humiliated or shamed, you're going to fall into that pit yourself. Okay, not you personally, none of you would do that, but a person who shames another person is going to end up being talked about and shamed themselves. Very important how we take other people's honor and their we don't treat them with dishonor or shame them, or as the person said, teach them a lesson. No. Okay, we want to give everyone possible the basic human dignity and respect. As a matter of fact, we can extrapolate this to include not just each other, not just our brothers and sisters, but the world at large. We don't want to be the instrument of shame, okay? Because shame in the Talmud, it's in Tanis, and I think it's to be, I can't really remember where, but shame, humiliating someone is likened to murder. And I know we've talked about this before. For some reason, the exact reference escapes me at the moment. And so the idea is to be very careful and not to shame others. And we know that Shaul and David's enemies, they set about to destroy him. They did destroy him verbally. They destroyed his reputation, called Motzi Shemra. They ruined his name in some quarters, and they all fell into the pit themselves. And then finally, the last verse is after all this happens and the person falls into the pursuer, in this case Shaul or whoever, falls into the pit, David is saved. And then he says, Odeh Hashem Kitzidko Va'azamra Shem Hashem El. I will thank Hashem according to his righteousness, okay? And I'm going to sing praise of Hashem who's on high. So David has it all planned out. I'm going to do this, and this is what's going to happen. I'm going to be able to sing Hashem's praises, predominantly because why? Because I did what was right, and Hashem was my refuge. Okay, so that's such a beautiful song. I really, really enjoyed that psalm so much this time. Today we are going to say Psalm 7. Remember what the segulas for it are. And we're also going to say the Psalms of the day. And those are, let me see. Oh, I think there's 60. Hold on one second. Today is Yud Aleph Teves, the 11th of Teves, 60 through 65. And I'm going to tell you what the segulas are. And please type in names that we can, for Refuah Sheleimah or anything specific you want to say us to say Tehillim for, we'll keep in mind the names. Type it in your chat, open your chat if you haven't already done so. And please keep in the names you want to us to keep in mind when we say Tehillim. We're also saying the Tehillim for ourselves and for Klal Yisrael and so on. Okay, Psalm 60 is the segula is, as we say this before we go to war. Hopefully we won't go to war. Okay. Psalm 61. This is interesting. For a person who's fearful of a certain place, if you have to go somewhere, okay, and you have a fear about that place, okay. Psalm 62, a prayer for forgiveness. Psalm 63, for success in business. Psalm 64, when crossing a river. That, I think some people also say it when they're crossing an ocean, when they're flying. I like to say Tehillim on a plane, on a boat, wherever. Not that I get to go on boats all that much, but Psalm 65, for success in requesting something from someone. If you need to go to your boss and ask for a raise, okay, say Psalm 65 before you go. If you need to go and ask a friend for an important favor, significant favor, okay, you run a not-for-profit and you need a donation, say Psalm 65 before you ask the person for help. Okay, so I'm going to read the names out, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay on with you for 5 minutes as we say the Psalms, but I will be leaving for all of you, and I'm going to really ask you to say the dates, Psalms. I'm going to be gone, but please say them. And I just have an appointment that I must go to. Okay, so the names are Revital Chaya Sarah Bat Leah, Rachel Bat Sarah, Revital Chaya Sarah Bat Leah, okay, Shani Malka Bas Michal Tamar, Moshe Tuvia Ben Yael, for Refuah Sheleimah, Aryeh Avraham ben Sarah, Emmanuel ben Eliza, Yirmiyahu ben Sarah, Moshe ben Sarah Leah, Orit bat Sarah, Yosef ben Sarah, Eliza bat Rachel, Rebecca bat Ruth. If anybody else wants to add names, we're just going to keep them in mind. And I'm going to end the recording and wish you all a good week. And we'll say Psalm 7. And then I think it is, what did I just say? It was 60 through 65. Okay, everyone. Let me stop the recording.